All right, welcome back. We are going to keep going with this tutorial, and now we're going to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to go to the Layout tab again and just take a look at what we have done so far and get set up for the next step. What we're going to do is build a bunch of buildings, not a bunch of buildings, but enough to where they're going to be looking different when they're replacing these simple cubes. And we're going to instantiate those buildings that we create onto this planet with geometry nodes that we were just working in the last video. And to get ourselves prepared for that, I want to go over to the outliner and just kind of do a little bit of organization work over here. I'm going to add in a new collection. I'm going to right click here, add in a new collection. I'm going to name this assets. And within here, I'm going to nest a couple more collections. Here, I'm going to name this one, let's name this one buildings big. And then another one at that level called buildings small. And then within here, a couple more, buildings big 1, buildings big 2, and buildings big 3. I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay, so now we have a bunch of nested collections. There's nothing in here yet, but this is going to organize ourselves, and this is where we're going to be creating some buildings that are going to be later used to replace all these ones that we're looking at now. And then this original cube that we had started with, let's rename that one with F2. Let's name that planet. Okay, so we have, I think we have ourselves organized here. I'm going to disable the scene, the main scene. In fact, let's just call this main scene. I'm going to disable that one now. So we shouldn't be seeing anything. And here's where we're going to do a little bit of modeling. Make sure you have buildings big 1 selected in the outliner, because this is where our new geometry is going to be. And the plan here is we're going to create 3 big buildings and 3 small ones. And we're going to make them similar-ish, but different enough. So when we multiply these across the planet, they'll look different enough where you won't really notice it. You can make more if you want, but I'm just going to stick with 3 and we'll go from there. So with buildings big 1, collection selected, I'm going to add in a plane here. I'm going to tab into that plane and hit S.5 to scale that down by half. So it's roughly 1 by 1 meter. Well, not roughly, it's exactly 1 by 1 meter. That's not super important, but it's kind of nice to work with 1 by 1 meter things just to kind of normalize our dimensions a little bit. And I'm just going to roughly model out a kind of a sci-fi looking building. It doesn't have to be very detailed. Don't spend a ton of time on this. In fact, the buildings that I'm about to model right now, I'm just going to give to you to use in this tutorial. If you want to skip this whole part, you can just use mine. No problem at all. I'll provide the link to that somewhere in the description here for you. All right, so let's create something. You don't have to do exactly what I'm doing here, but if you want to, you can follow me exactly if you want. So I'm going to tab in here and extrude this with E. I'm going to extrude that up a little bit and then inset that with I. Extrude that up a little bit more, maybe one more time. I'm going to grab this edge and with G and then Y, I'm going to just move that in a little bit. I'm going to select this face, bring that up, something like that. I don't quite like how thick this base is. I'm going to select all these 4 faces and then S, Shift Z to scale those in a little bit, something like that. Looks all right. Let's see. I'm going to go back to the top here. I'm going to tab in and then in face select mode, select this top face, extrude that up a little bit, maybe move this edge in. I'm going to hit G and then X to move that in. Extrude this up, maybe in, down a little bit. Okay, that's about roughly the shape that I think I want. And I think on top, I'm going to add in some more geometry. So I'm going to move my cursor up here with Shift right click, and I'm going to add in with Shift A cube and tab in and scale that way down, something like that. Move that in a little bit here, maybe scale it down, move it around, and then select this face and do cursor to selected. So the cursor's exactly in the middle of that face. I'm going to tab out of that, and then I'm going to add in a circle And I don't need 32 verts, so I'm going to make this maybe 16, tab into that, and then hit F to fill, scale that down with S. I'm going to add a little bit of a spire on the top of this building. Just extrude that up. Something like that might look okay. I think I like that. Now notice over here in the outliner that there's multiple objects in this collection. That is okay because we're going to instantiate entire collections on each point on the surface of the planet. So you can have multiple objects in here. I don't recommend having a ton in there, but just enough to achieve the detail that you want. Okay, I think I'm going to start to add in a little bit of kind of detail in the side of the building. I'm going to go a little bit faster now. Just a little bit of variation on detail here. I'm going to bevel this with Control B just to add some interesting little elements. Maybe add another cube here. Don't really know exactly what I'm doing here, but just something that looks a little bit sci-fi-ish. Let's go up to the top here, maybe add in a little bit more detail here. Maybe another cube here. Something like that. I'm going to add in a loop cut right here. And maybe this kind of juts out a little bit. And whatever you want. I think I'm also going to add a bevel modifier to this just so it softens it up a little bit. So I'm going to go to the modifiers tab, add a bevel modifier with 3 segments. Just going to bring the amount down quite a bit here, something pretty small. And then right click to shade smooth. I think we're going to want an auto smooth here too. So in the object data properties under this normal section, you can tick on auto smooth there, and that should fix some of the shading. I'm going to use the similar bevel for these other objects. Instead of repeating that whole process over and over again, I can select each object, each of these objects, and then finally the one that I just beveled. And then if I hit Control L, I can do link, is it link mod? No, it's copy modifiers. There we go. So now all those have the same bevel. So I don't have to repeat all that work. In this spire, let's shade that smooth, and let's hit auto smooth for that one as well. And I think we can bevel that one a little bit as well. 3 segments. Bring the amount down a little bit there, maybe move it down. Make sure these are shade smooth. All right. I think this side here is a little bit boring. I think I want to do something about that. Maybe inset this and bring that out slightly. Looks kind of interesting, I guess. I'm going to bring this just in a little bit more. Okay. Shading is not perfect on this, but it really doesn't matter. I think that's going to be okay. Not going to be able to see any of that in the final scene. Let's see if we can make this base a little bit more interesting. Let's select this perimeter, maybe bring that up a little bit like that. Okay. So these buildings don't really have to be any more complicated than this. They can be if you want, but you don't need to go crazy. Now, one final bit here that I want to add to these big buildings in particular. And you'll see why a little bit later in the tutorial, but I think I need a separate piece of geometry to serve as kind of like a bright, kind of like cyberpunk city sign type thing that you see in like Blade Runner and stuff like that. I just need a separate piece of geometry that is going to serve that purpose for me. So I'm going to move my cursor to the side of the building there with shift right click, and I'm going to add in a plane, tab in and rotate that along the X axis by 90 degrees. Tab out and move that a little bit out. Just going to resize this slightly, something like this. And I think let's just realign this a little bit down. Yeah, something like this I think is going to be, it's going to be good. Actually, let's put it to the other side. Let's put it over here, raise it up a little bit. Okay, so it's just a plane. And I'm going to make sure that all these objects are in the right collection. If you look over in my outliner, you'll see all these objects. There's about 7 or 8 of them. They're all in this collection called Buildings Big One. And this plane right here is separate. I'm just going to name this sign just so I know what it is. And this is just going to get a little bit of a different shader when we get to that point in the tutorial. And this is going to be very bright, and this rest of the buildings is going to be dark with windows and kind of like some accent lighting and things like that. All right, that's our first big building. Now let's collapse this. I'm going to turn this collection off, and I'm going to go over to building small one, make sure that collection is selected. I'm going to reset my cursor to the world origin. That's very important. Make sure that all these buildings that we're creating are the base of, the footprint of them is centered on the world origin. And I'm going to make a much smaller building here. I'm going to add in a plane, tab in and size that down by, again, 0.5. And this one, I'm just going to make sure that this is kind of short and a little bit more blocky. So I'm just taking faces and I'm extruding these out, doing loop cuts, not getting too complicated. I'm just kind of making something kind of interesting here, but not overly complex. So let's add in a bevel modifier on this one with 3 segments. Again, shade that smooth, although that probably won't matter. All right, that's one small building. And I'm going to make other buildings now, but I'm going to quickly fast forward through this. But make buildings that are roughly the same size as these two in their own respective collections, but introduce some variation. Like make maybe make one building have a, kind of like a rounded edge or something, or maybe it's got a different kind of overall shape to it. So make sure that they're not really too similar, because we're going to be duplicating these around the world, and we just want them to look, we want them to look random. So, all right, I'm going to build 4 more buildings. We're going to fast forward through this, and I'll see you in just a moment. Okay, what just happened there? Let's take a look at what we have. There are 3 big buildings and 3 small buildings, each in their own collection. So I'm just going to turn these on one by one. There's the first big building, the second one, and the third one. And if I turn them all on, you'll see that they're all kind of intersecting on top of one another. That is what we actually want. We want these things oriented around the world origin here. And it's important because when they get instantiated on all those points that are distributed around the land on the planet, those points are going to be at the base of the building. So we're going to have our planet like this, and all these buildings are going to be kind of added to the surface, and all the points will be at their foot. So that's what's going to happen there. Those are all the big buildings. I'm going to turn these off again. And then 3 smaller buildings that are hopefully going to fill out the surface of the planet at a more street level scale. And those each have their own separate collections as well. So again, you can model your own, or you can just take mine, whatever you want. All right, that'll do it for this video. In the next one, we're going to distribute all these buildings we just made on the planet. So I'll see you there.